All right, mates, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody is doing awesome this week. Again, major big shout out to everybody. Appreciate the love, a lot of messages, all the comments on the YouTube channel. We basically on Labor Day surpassed 5,000 subscribers, and now we're almost at 7,000. Adding 2,000 subscribers here in the last 2 days, and it's all based on the content that you guys want. The content, and I try to get it back to as many of you guys message-wise on YouTube and on Facebook and on Instagram and TikTok. I haven't gotten back to any of questions or messages. I will. That is my commitment. To keep growing and growing and growing and covering content. And today we have the last edition. That's right, the last power rankings of the 2022 KFL campaign, the road to Chickamauga. We've been doing these power rankings all season long, to some criticism, but I think most people get it. And it really all just stems from being transparent in terms of communicating to people like how these teams are actually ranked, right? And it's important. Any metric or anything that you're going to do, whether it be an MVP, an AOI, a lot of the trail series, they're transparent with how it's being done. It's being tabulated. It's not being done in secret. There's no secret votes. There's no whatever. People are, legitimate organizations. They're transparent about, the process and everything. And that's what I try to do on the channel. Look, the power rankings is simply a reflection of performance on the water in a team concept, right? So it basically comes down to the very parameters that the KFL set at the beginning of the season in which a team could qualify for the playoffs. And inevitably, all of the power ranked teams on this channel that we have talked about and we have ranked in the rankings made the playoffs. The ones that consistently ranked higher in our power rankings all throughout the season made the playoffs. That says that our power ranking, and speaking with people too, and getting feedback and getting ideas and getting things from people, was accurate, and others weren't, even remotely weren't, because they were subjective and they factored in things that aren't part of the process of a power ranking. Like on paper, we see this in all sports. On paper, we think the Los Angeles Lakers are going to win the NBA championship, right? On paper, we think a certain team is going to win the Super Bowl. I mean, unless, of course, you're a Dallas Cowboy fan and you think your team's going to win the Super Bowl every year. Okay. Hadn't really happened in a long, long time, let alone playoff wins. But anyway, but that's how it is when you allow subjective things to come into it, and you just don't focus on, okay, these are the metrics, this is how it's done, it is what it is. Okay? It's why people like computers and people hate computers. It's why people like machine learning and people hate machine learning, because you can't subjectively interject things for your own benefit. If you're doing it that way, if you plug in the quant analysis, this is what I want. Rank the teams based on this, on this, on this, on this. This is what you get, and you can't really argue about it. And arguing makes for great content, I guess. But in reality, you're left with a power ranking that really wasn't reflective of what the road to Chickamauga looks like, right? So the end of the year power rankings has always been comprised, again, of your overall record, your divisional record, your head-to-head record, really within your division is what it comes down to, and then your points differential for points for, points against in the matches, games that you played against your opponents. And so that's your power ranking. It's not who you're going to play next. It's not who's on your team. It's not this, it's not any of that subjective analysis. That's something for totally different. Maybe MVP, maybe whatever, where we know it's all subjective, right? The guy who scores the most points doesn't always win the MVP. And so that's how the power rankings have worked all season. So the final power ranking of the 2022 KFL campaign is pretty much reflective of what it's been pretty consistently all season long, with Coosa in the south, Granite State in the north at 1-2, followed by the Indy Knights and the Southern Slayers. Now, that will shock some people, I know, and I know I will get all kinds of messages because I always do. Why I would throw the Southern Slayers above, say, the Virginia Reapers, who won their division, right? They won the Piedmont. Well, again, it doesn't apply whether or not you won it. Power ranking doesn't care if you won your division. Power ranking applies. Southern Slayers have a 5-3 record, a 4-2 divisional record. So do the Reapers, but you got to look at divisional, right? And then you got to look at head to head, and then you got to look at differential. Okay, so while the Southern Slayers didn't win their division, obviously they finished behind the Coosa Kingfishers, who finished 6-2 and 4-1 overall. They did have a higher power ranking than someone who may have won their division, and because it doesn't factor in that stuff. Now, subjectively, people will send me messages and say, "Oh, well, the Southern Slayers are better than Virginia." Okay, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But the metric that you use and you plug in makes that in a power ranking different than subjective analysis on who may win the playoffs, who head all that kind of stuff, right? And so those are your top 4 teams. Now, the seeding in the playoffs is different because that's not a power ranking. That is just like the NFL, and that's what the KFL has said all season long, that they pattern everything after. Okay? Remember that for future videos. Everything. And the Reapers won their division in the Piedmont, so they're a seed, right? They're not a wild card team. Slayers have to play in the wild card, okay? So again, the power ranking is different. After the Southern Slayers, you've got Motor City, okay? Coming in that, in terms of that seeding. And then you have, we're talking about the North here. You got Motor City is actually the 4th power rank team. Sorry, Slayers are 5. So in the North, you've got Granite State Sticks, Indy Knights, Motor City Ambassadors, Massachusetts Maulers, Rhode Island Rebels, and then Pennsylvania. Again, Pennsylvania won their division, but as far as power rankings go, those are your power rank 6 in the North. Now, in the South, your power rank 6th, okay? We're doing it because we're going into the playoffs, so you kind of know the North and South, right? How things shook out this season, right? Power rank teams in the South are Coosa at 6-2, 4-1, Southern Slayers 5-3, 4-2, Virginia Reapers 5-3, 4-2, Arkansas Hogs 5-3, 4-2, Palmetto Punishers 4-3, and 5-3 and 4-3, and the Washington Warhawks 4-4, 3-1. Now, we're gonna take a step further. Okay, again, just power rankings. But now you get into the analysis, and the analysis for people to figure out, like, well, how did that, man, how's this differential work? How does playoffs, how did Week 9 impact the playoffs? Because certain teams had to win, certain teams lost. It really it came down to your overall record. And then a few, like the Tennessee Shiners, it came down to differential because of tiebreakers and head-to-head and all that, and Tennessee Shiners did not make the playoffs. Now, it will shock a lot of people, okay? Because at the beginning of the season, if you go back and you watch, the Tennessee Shiners were, on paper, based on prior non-KFL performances, the best team in the league. Based on paper, okay? People who have won KBF events, people that have won Hobie, AOI events, people that have won Bass Master Kayak Series events, like Eric Siddiqui, for example, on the Tennessee Shiners. So on paper, that team, people were like, were talking to them in terms of really pushing the Lone Star Bandits from Texas, who made the championship last year against the Massachusetts Maulers. And so people were like, man, it's a brand new team in the league. They are stacked. You're talking, originally the roster, Eric Siddiqui, Ewing Minor, Christine Fisher, Josh Stewart, Jody Queen, think I can't remember. I can't remember any other guys. Sorry, but I'm saying those are all top sticks, right? Hammers in kayak fishing that everybody knows. Almost everybody knows most of those people, especially Christine Fisher, Jody Queen. You know, the only other one I think that would probably rival that would be Cody Milton, who's leading the AOI, I believe, in Hobie right now in 2022. He played for Arkansas, but other than that, those are kind of like community names. Like if you've been following kayak fishing for a blink, you know who those people are. They were all on one team, by the way. Okay, think about that. So right now, if you look at the top 50 Hobie Angler of the Year race, right? Other than Cody and maybe one or two others, 4 or 5 of that top 50 for Hobie were all on one KFL team, the Tennessee Shiners, and they didn't make the playoffs. So that tells you a little bit about the league in terms. People talk about parity and all that in a lot of sports leagues, but some things don't translate to team concepts. Individual performances, sometimes don't come together like dream teams, right? You could make the argument that Tennessee was the dream team of the KFL, and they didn't make the playoffs, right? They went 4-4, 3-3. They went 500 across the board. Now, the thing that the league needs to focus on, I mean, if you're an owner, if you're coming into the KFL, for example, next year, it looks like there's going to be a lot of shakeup. A lot of the messages that I've got, a lot of the people that are talking, there's probably 2, 3, maybe 4 teams that are going to leave the KFL, potentially. And then you probably got 2 or 3 more teams coming into the KFL, right? I mean, that's just turnover. That's just what happens with any organization. You've got the KAF, Kayak Anglers of Florida, doing their fall series in Florida. It doesn't compete with KBF, doesn't compete with KFL, team concept. That's probably going to create some more teams for Florida. So don't be surprised if the KFL next year has a all Florida division, okay, of 5 Florida teams. I would not put it past, because a lot of those people down there that you talk to aren't really competing in a lot of other events because they're so further away. Like, the travel is just unbelievable. Can you imagine having to go from Central Florida to Winnipesaukee, or Central Florida to Snow Pond, Central Florida to Susquehanna for some of these events, or Central Florida to Lake Fork or Sam Rayburn? Like, a lot of people just don't. And so the KFL may suit them. You know, and what we've seen with the KFL this year is a lot of the people that have excelled this year have not been well-known names. Granite Sticks, for example. I firmly believe that the MVP of the league it should be coming from one of 2 places. One, Coley McAllen, based on every game performance, or a member of the Granite State Six. You could think people could say, oh, well, Steve O'Brien hasn't played enough matches yet, but when he's played, his team has won, and they've won because of him. That's an MVP. Jake Anglis, same thing. Jake's played a lot more games, obviously, than Steve has, but all that should factor in. You know, I don't know if, what kind of they'll set it up. But if you look at, like, the Hobie anglers, okay, the top Hobie anglers, right, how did they this year, like, what was their mindset, and what should be the mindset of people who are going to fish the Hobie Trail next year, and whether or not they should compete in the KFL? Like, because if you look at it, Christine Fisher, I mean, barring her and Jordan Marshall was also in the AOI race and participates in Hobie. They went to Sweden, right? Like, they went Hobie. They had all kinds of stuff this summer going on. But Christine fished in one event for the Shiners. I think it was like the first event, maybe the second. Eric Siddiqui fished in 5. He fished the most of all of, other than Josh Stewart. So of the Hobie AOI top 50, the anglers that participate in the KFL, Eric Siddiqui and Josh Stewart, above and beyond, fished more matches in the KFL than any of those Hobie anglers. So those Hobie anglers, they're real. Let's be honest. Their concentration and focus has been on the Hobie AOI series, right? Ewing Minor is number 3 right now in Hobie. He fished in 3 events. Christine Fisher is second in Hobie AOI. She fished in 1 event. Trying to think. Josh Stewart is 5 in AOI in Hobie. He fished in 6. And you've got Jordan Marshall fishing in 3. Jason Cassidy fished in 3. Jason Broach fished in 3. Jody Queen for the Shiners fished in 2. Josh Deal, Slayers, I think, fished in 5. Okay? And so what you want to look, we also can look at is take a look at how those Hobie anglers performed in the team concept, right? Versus how they perform when it's individual. When all they're worried about is themselves, dialed in. They're not part of a team of 3 other anglers. They're just fishing events. Boom. Individual events, right? It's a totally different mindset, right? I think we all can agree on that. And so when owners are building these teams out for next season, they need to go and dial in that analysis and look, how did the actual Hobie anglers perform in KFL? Because let's be honest, KFL probably was not a focus. And I would argue shouldn't have been. Like, as much as the league wants them to be. But, I mean, KBF, Hobie are money paying. The anglers in the KFL are not being paid for their they're not being paid per event. They're not salaried across the board. They're not. There's no guarantee. I mean, there's no guarantee in any events. But, you know, and so their focus is on, you know, Hobie, where it should be. And you look at links. And so you look at, like, you know, those participants. Joe McElroy's another one. He fished in 3 events for Kuza this year. So most of them did not fish more than 3 of the 8 events, okay, because of other commitments, scheduling conflicts, all of that stuff that KFL has to figure out when it schedules its games, because if it's going to take a lot of Hobie anglers, or Hobie anglers want to come into the league, you know, in the beginning of the season, the league said they weren't going to schedule their games around Hobie. They're not going to factor any of that. You can go back and check the video. But at the end of the day, a lot of events this year for KFL, were held during Hobie events, like Susquehanna, Winnipesaukee. It's going to happen on Dardanelle in the playoffs, right? I mean, this is so. Take that for what it's worth. That puts a lot of different stuff on these anglers that are trying to win a Hobie event for AOI, but then they're also got the KFL thing going on at the same time. That's a lot going down for those guys. And a lot of them, like I know the KFL kind of dropped shade on Cody Milton because, the guy only fished 2 events in the KFL and he averaged 43 inches an event. But KFL was never his focus for the Arkansas Hogs. He's number 1 in the Hobie AOI. People need to get a grip with that. And not just throw a guy under the bus. Because, and again, it's easy to say the guy only fished 2 events, right? And he's probably one of the top, definitely the top 5 anglers in the country. And I don't know why you want to say that stuff about somebody who chose to fish in your league, who is a top hammer, who could attract other anglers, and he's getting criticized and judged. It just didn't make any sense. And then other people get celebrated, a lot of times in the league that it's all friendships and personalities. It's not performance on the water, because the performances don't rise to that level when you've got people, that are fishing 4, 5, 6 events, like the Granite State guys that are averaging well over 100 inches every event. Okay? And so that aren't fishing. Well, I'm sure Jake and I'm sure those guys fish maybe. I don't think they're fishing the whole Hobie Trail. I know they fish Winnipesaukee and maybe Susquehanna, but they're fishing mostly regional events. So that's a kind of interesting. The other caveat to what you have with the power rankings and reflection of how they're configured is a team like the Washington Warhawks and the Motor City Ambassadors. They're both in the playoffs, and part of that stems from scheduling. They both only had 4 divisional games. They're the only 2 teams with, I believe, 4 divisional games scheduled. They both went 3-1. Okay, and they're in the playoffs. So you can if you're so you can argue like, wait, what? How'd that? And again, there's reasons West Virginia left in April, but again, you're looking at Florida, for example, the Copperheads. I believe they have the same exact division or overall 4-4, and they played 8 games in their division. 8 games in their division, and their division had 25 wins in it. Think about that. Okay, Washington played 4 games in its division, and its division only had 19 wins. They have one less team, I think, too. But think about that. So 6 more wins in the division of all the teams in terms of being competitive, and they played 8 of them. Okay, finished 4-4 in their overall record. Okay, and their differential, 229-point differential. Washington's differential is like 70, I think. Washington's in the playoffs. Florida's not. You know what I mean? It's like same record more or less. You go through the divisional stuff. I think they were even across the board, 4-4. So Florida was 4-4 overall. 4-4 overall. 4-4 obviously because there was only 8 games. I'm an idiot. But they didn't play. They played all divisional games, whereas the Warhawks played outside the division. I think they played Motor City twice. I think they played the Delaware Doom and maybe New York Empire. I can't remember. But it's like versus, Reapers 7 games, Casters 6, Privateers 6, Lunkers 5. So you know what I mean? Like that factors in a little bit there. They got in, one of the last teams to get into playoffs. At 4-4, 3-1. And you got Natural State did not make the playoffs at 3-1. I mean, they're 3-1. They played 4 games. They won 3. They lost 1. But they still did not get in because they carried over. The league gave them, that's the team with the asterisk I always talk about, because the league gave them the 1 win of the Bandits that basically had that win. That win should have gone to the Oklahoma Outlaws for the forfeit. Oklahoma then would have made Oklahoma 4-2 in their division, if you think about it, that win. Because it would have been a forfeit win if everything else stayed the same, okay, after the issue with the Bandits. And Oklahoma would be in the playoffs. So at the end of the day, we'll get into it later on about how that all went down when we release a video of the Lone Star Bandit story that chronicles 2 years of the Lone Star Bandits from Texas in the KFL and everything that's happened, okay? But if that doesn't happen, there's a good chance that the Oklahoma Outlaws are in the playoffs. That changed their season. People talk about the whole Arkansas Natural State thing. You've got the owner of the Arkansas Hogs actually being a player on the Natural State Eagles and also the rep for the Southwest Division. All that conflict of interest we'll get into. But at the end of the day, it probably was Oklahoma who took it on the chin with everything that went down. And it's unfortunate. There's a bunch of guys and shouldn't happen to anybody. So that's the power rankings. Again, Coosa, Granite City, Indy Knights, Motor City, Southern Slayers, and on the way down, heading towards the playoffs after the All-Star Celebrity match on Saturday on the road to Chickamauga. All right, mates.